Hello artists, and welcome to day 74 of the epic journey. My name is DaleneFM, and today we're going to be looking in much more detail at how to mix flesh. A few epic journey lessons ago, I was mixing a flesh color for a glazed portrait. And I got a message from Tanitha Silva in Johannesburg, South Africa, and she was asking me to go into much more detail about how I mixed that flesh color, because in the video it wasn't about the flesh color, so I sort of skipped all the detail. The video jumps from me starting to mix to the complete color. So today I'm going to go into much more detail about how to mix a flesh color, what I was doing that day, and then further along how to actually start taking that flesh color into the various tones and values that you're going to need for a portrait that doesn't involve glazing, so it would be for an opaque portrait. So as you well know, we're going to be going into an impressionist painting. We will probably start that one tomorrow. I just wanted to have a look at the flesh colors first, A, because Tanith asked me to go into more detail about it, so I wanted to answer her question, and B, because we're going to mix flesh colors for the impressionistic painting that we're going to be doing, so it's a good idea to go through this exercise now before we start the impressionistic painting. So let's get the camera overhead and start mixing our flesh color. See you in a bit. Alright, so what I've done here is I'm going to actually mix here, and on this side I'm going to do the little blob so that you can actually have a recipe as such. Before I do this though, I want to let you know that this is my way of doing flesh. There are as many artists as what paint portraits, so there are recipes to mix a flesh color. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. There's no one right way or wrong way. There's no perfect way of doing it, and every way has its pros and its cons, and as I'm going along I'll explain to you why I do it the way that I do it. Now I like to start off with Naples yellow, and the reason for that is because it's probably the closest to flesh color with that you can sort of start with. I mean, it's nowhere near flesh color, but of all the colors that are available, unless you actually buy flesh, it's probably the closest color to flesh. You can buy flesh in the tube. I prefer not to, because I don't really like it. I find them to be a little bit too pinkish, and you then want to try and cool down that temperature. You don't quite know what is in there. Okay, so what I've done here is I'm warming it up to start off with. I've got a blob of Naples yellow, a lot of Naples yellow as you can see, with a tiny little blob of alizarin crimson and a slightly bigger but still very small blob of burnt sienna. Now I like the burnt sienna because it's slightly on the brownish orangey side, and I like the alizarin crimson because it's so incredibly strong, and alizarin crimson will do a lot very quickly. Now as you can see, we're getting closer. We're still nowhere near there, but my value is a lot closer to what it should be here. But the color itself is still very, very warm. One thing that we don't realize about European flesh is how cool it is. We tend to think of European flesh being pink, and it's actually not. There's quite a lot of blue and green in it. So if we go here to our recipe, we've got burnt sienna and alizarin with Naples yellow. So that's what we've added. And the dots I've got here, that's sort of proportionate. Not really, but you're going to need a little bit more burnt sienna than you are going to need alizarin, because alizarin is a lot stronger than burnt sienna. And that is going to result that's going to give you that result. Okay, now the next thing that I need to do is I need to start cooling it down. Now you can cool it down with either a green or a blue, it doesn't really matter. I like to start with the blue because that's the color that's on your color wheel, that is your cooler color, and Viridian is, well, green is going to be your blue and your yellow, and you've already got a lot of yellow in here, obviously because your color is a yellow base. So I'm going to start off with a French ultramarine. I'll only go to Viridian if I need it, and that will be relative to the light reflection that is on the face of that particular portrait. But you need a very, very small amount of French ultramarine. You really don't need a lot. I've decided that I didn't quite put enough alizarin crimson in, so I'm going to go back and put a little bit more alizarin in. Right, so at this point I'm going to have a look and decide how close am I to where I want to be. Maybe needs a tad more blue. Tiny little bit more French ultramarine. Now French ultramarine is a strong pigment, so you really don't need a lot. Please don't go putting large blobs on, because you're just going to make very blue very quickly. Now, in case you're wondering why this changed, I put the wrong blob in the wrong place, so I had to wipe it out and redo it. So forgive me for that. Still a little bit more. Now, you see my method, I'm not going to any specific recipe, X amount of this plus X amount of that. It's not a recipe per se. I just know that I've got, these are the colors that I want to use, this is the tone I want to create, and I just play with those colors until I get to where I want to be. Now look at that. There's very little difference. I probably need a little bit more French ultramarine there. Now in this case I'm matching to my hand. Like I said in that particular video that I was working on, I usually, when I'm mixing European flesh, I'll do match to my own hand, simply because it's what's available. You could of course be matching to your picture if you're working from a source material, or if you're working from a live model, then you match to your model's hand or your model's flesh, of course. But I just find my left hand is always available. And there we have it. I think I'm there. Right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start toning. I want to go up in value and down in value. So I want a flesh color that is going to, let's just put that there. I want a flesh color that is going to give me higher values and lower values. So of course for your higher values it's really easy. You're just going to go with a bit of titanium white to lighten it up. Well, it doesn't have to be titanium white, sorry, it can be any white. I like titanium white simply because it is temperature neutral. But otherwise, you know, you can use whichever white that you like. Whichever white you are used to, the soft mixing white, the zinc white, whichever white you are used to mixing with, you can certainly use. Now at this stage of the game, I might start looking towards a yellow, because it depends on my source material, but I might start wanting to mix something that has a little bit more yellow in it, because there may be sunlight shining on the flesh that is making it particularly yellow. So I might need a much more yellow version of the color that I'm working with. At the moment I'm working out of my head, so I don't really know for sure, but that would be something that I would consider. Now, with me having added a little bit of yellow to it, you can see the difference there between those two colors. That one's just got slightly more yellow added to it than that one. That might be very necessary depending on the composition that you're working with at the time. One color I haven't mentioned here is the burnt umber. I've got a little bit of burnt umber here as well. Now the burnt umber is not there for the initial mixing, it is there for the value mixing, because burnt umber is going to give us a slightly darker value. Now burnt umber is really nice for the mid values. As you can see, just a little bit of burnt umber is going to give us an in-between mid-value flesh tone. When, however, we start going to some of the deeper values, we're going to want to start working with some of the cooler colors as well. So you'd put a little bit of burnt umber and a little bit of French ultramarine in to get some of your really deeper flesh values. You want it to be blue or green. When you're looking at your source material, whether it be in life or a photograph, have a look at the deeper values and decide for yourself whether those values are more on the green side or more on the blue side. So there I've done a Viridian version of it for you. Now what I wanted to show you with that is how incredibly strong Viridian is. So you really, even more so than French ultramarine, you need the tiniest little blob. Now let's put a little bit of the French ultramarine with it so that you can see the difference between the two. I'm playing with color, as you can see. Just playing with color. Okay, now I want a slightly lilac-y version. Now remember that red and blue make purple. So I have this tiny little blob of purple going on, and I'm going to mix a very small amount of it, because I've got two very, very, very strong pigments there, so I don't want them to overpower the flesh. I just want to get the slightly lilac version. Now this lilac-y version of the flesh is really nice for when you're working in reflected light shadows. So if it's in shadow but it's reflected light, so it'll be sort of on the underside of an arm, possibly an area that the light is going to be bouncing off of somewhere else. Now let's do a slightly lighter version of the Viridian. Just take a little bit of that. Now the reason I'm doing this is because this just slightly green version of the flesh color is really, really good. If you're painting a portrait of somebody that's outdoors, you'll find that these two versions, this lilac-y version and the slightly green version, are going to be very, very prevalent in your portrait. They're going to be reflecting the light around, the ambient natural light around your model a lot. So those two are very common colors for outdoor portrait painting. And then what I'm going to do now is just really beef one up with yellow. Now this is again for really, whoopsie, let's get rid of that. This is when you're painting outdoors, you've got a considerable amount of sunlight on your model. The brightest sunlight areas are not going to be this color, they're going to be white. Flesh, the brightest version of flesh that you can get is going to be white. Direct sunlight off of white is, direct sunlight off of flesh is going to give you white. But this is going to be your sort of mid-tone value in your brightest highlight areas. So you can see, maybe I've done it a little bit too yellow, but it's going to be a very yellow version. Right, artists, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to get rid of one of the colors. If you don't have Naples yellow, we're going to mix a Naples yellow, because Naples yellow will be your base. And a Naples yellow is not the kind of color that you necessarily need to buy, so let's see if we can mix a Naples yellow. So we're going to start off with white, because it's a very light color, so we're going to need a considerable amount of white. Of course we need a considerable amount of yellow as well, and of course just the white and the yellow together is going to make a very lemon color. Far too bright, we need to tone that down. We need to warm it up slightly, so let's go with a bit of burnt sienna. I need to tone that down a little bit, so let's just put some more white, because I'm heading for a slightly lighter value. Now the burnt sienna is quite orange, so we're getting a little bit of an orange version, so let's take a little bit of burnt umber. We just want to dirty it up slightly. Let's put some more yellow. And there we have our homemade Naples yellow. Okay, artists, so what I've done here is I've actually just laid out all the colours in a much more simple manner, because we've been messing around in all sorts of pieces of paper. This is our original lot of colours that we started working with: Naples Yellow, Alizarin Crimson, Burnt Sienna, Burnt Umber, French Ultramarine, Viridian Chrome and Yellow. You can substitute Alizarin Crimson with Permanent Rose, for example. You can substitute Burnt Umber with Van Dyck Brown. Burnt Sienna you can't really, it's quite a unique colour. French Ultramarine can be substituted with either Ultramarine or Phthalo Blue. Viridian can be substituted with Phthalo Green. Chrome Yellow can be substituted with Cad Yellow Light. So you don't have to use these colours, you can use the equivalent as long as they're visually very similar to this. We got rid of the Naples Yellow by using some of the other colours to achieve the Naples Yellow. That's what I've got down here. So you really don't need any more than those, and in fact you don't even really need the Naples Yellow. So artists, that was a much more in-depth look at how to mix flesh colours. Please understand that that's my way of doing it. There's many different ways. You're welcome to figure it out for yourself and find your own way of doing it, and I hope that that little lesson gives you a little bit of guidance to do so. At some stage in the near future I'm going to start really concentrating on colour and mixing various colours that are out of gamut. So today we've concentrated on flesh, and I hope that it has helped you, and if so, please would you like and share and go and do all those things that you usually do on the internet. And I will see you tomorrow in day 75. Gosh, 75 days already. Bye. That's what you want to do.